moneymaker, housing. And I just want Elon Musk, he said something the other day, and you can't escape that guy, no matter where you are, even in housing, he opines, and it makes things happen. He said it would relieve a lot of pressure in the economy if housing came down. At the same time, I look at the 30-year fixed mortgage rates. Today, we're at about 6.64. The 52-week range is between, we'll call it six even, and about 685. So we're really in the high end of that range. Man, housing rates have not come down. Supply and demand is kind of interesting. What are we seeing in housing overall? Is it status quo? Are things giving, breaking, getting better? What's your guys' perspective on that?
Well, I think if you look at yeah, I'll just jump in
Yeah.
first too, is if you look at a lot of headlines, you can see sorts of problems in places like Florida where people, they seem to flock there, and then all of a sudden now, 7 out of 10 homes are listed lower than the price that they were purchased, or whatever the stat is, and then you start to see some other maybe what you call overbuilt or just kind of overhyped areas where people are saying like, oh no, there's a lot that's going on here, and people are not in as good shape, or they're more anxious to sell, and yet there are no buyers. I think a lot of this is it. And I think you'd already caveated some of this too, but it's MSA dependent, right? And so places where there's just not that much housing stock or supply, they're still finding all kinds of trouble with first-time buyers, and people being able to get to some affordability level. But then there's also plenty of places where people are getting a little bit more worried about the equity in their home. So with that kind of divergence, I think if you think about something like RMBS, and I'm just kind of moving into how this affects things like securities, one of the things that Garrett and some others have talked about over the years is that the rating agencies did get that geographic diversity kind of right? And so if you think about the broad swath of the nation still being, at a fairly settled or stable level in terms of home price movement, some a little bit higher, some a little bit lower, but having that geographic diversity across something like a mortgage collateral pool is really beneficial. And then for a lot of the stuff that we certainly like and have emphasized, things like season collateral, right? Where you've got a borrower who's been in there for many years. They have an LTV in the high 30s or 40%. Obviously, they're going to be a lot less affected by something like a broad house or home price movement. And so something like that is going to be better for the stability of that collateral. And I'm really glad that we have a lot of those positions.
Yeah. Garrett, let me ask you, we've talked a lot about, or I've heard you guys talk a lot about our inventory across the country is low. Has that changed? And what's the breakdown in inventory for sale from new homes versus existing homes? Because I think we can talk a lot about supply and demand, but that's two very different things. New home supply versus existing home supply, and the movement of that in the economy. Those are two different things that impact broad sections of the economy in different ways, do they not?
Yeah, inventories have been interesting. Mostly because people are stuck in a mortgage. If you had a mortgage, or refinanced when rates are low, your mortgage might be 3.5%. And now looking at 6 plus, that's a lot of money. And moving and keeping your same payment is going to mean 20-30% less house. And so people just don't want to move. And that's been the culprit for no inventory for a long time. But that's been the case now for 4 years. And so eventually that pressure, it's built, and things are starting to move. People put off their move, they put off their retirement, they put off their downsizing, whatever it was, relocation for work, as long as they could. But now that inventory's definitely ticked up. And some people even had to refinance, in their current home for cash needs or whatever. And so now they're able to move, as well. And so inventories have creeped up. The demand, though, there's a lot of demographics really driving demand. You've got more 30-year-olds living at home than ever before. They want to be in a house, and for the most part, they have the jobs and things to support them. But with rates where they're at right now, what they had envisioned in affording, they can no longer afford. And so the demand side has waned a lot, especially in the last year or so. And so kind of the battle between low supply and low demand, low demand's winning out. We're starting to see areas, as Brian mentioned, several MSAs, especially the ones that ran up a lot, are selling off, quite a bit. I know here in Boise, Idaho, there are, homes that are on the market, 5-10% below where they were bought 5 years ago, and they're getting like 1 or 2 visitors a month, like looking at it. I mean, there's just, some areas that, there's definitely that challenge. And so I think there's some pressure on home prices. In terms of new homes versus existing homes, this kind of plays into that challenge as well. In most areas, if there is a new home option similar to, let's say you're selling a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, certain square footage, if there's anything in the vicinity that's a new home, the next generation of home buyers are going for the new home. And so the existing homes are having more difficult time selling and typically getting a lower price. On top of that, the home builders have gotten very good about, they've got some decent balance sheets, so they'll offer, help with the mortgage, buy down their mortgage rate. They offer some incentives. The amount of incentives that have been offered is way up, and so the home builders are moving it, but they've even pulled back a little bit now. The number of permits that have been issued, meaning homes that they're ready to build on. Versus actually starting to build, that pool has really accumulated and built up. And so the home builders thought they were going to have opportunities to build and sell homes, and now they're kind of looking at the market going, we're better off waiting. And some of that supply might come down a little bit, but right now new homes are definitely winning out in that area.